Hello and welcome. I don't know if my cat's gonna join me. She is here. Hi, baby. You coming down? Oh, good girl. There she is. Yeah. So I wasn't sure she was gonna join me because she hasn't been feeling that good this week. Yeah. She she's on antibiotics at the moment because she just had some nebulous symptoms. And hopefully those help her out. But yeah, she wasn't feeling that good. Where are you, Dax? Yeah, my poor baby. But she does seem to be perking up to me, so hopefully she'll be fine. Hi. You want to show everyone your pretty face real quick? She's like, no, I don't, actually. Sorry, baby. She's not actually the biggest fan. Okay. Okay, that's her rubbing up on the tripod. Come here, babe. She's actually not the biggest fan of me picking her up right now because we have to, it's a 2-person job to give her antibiotics. Never let anyone tell you it's easier to give a big animal medicine than a rat, because it's not. But anyway, let's get into the video. You're not here for the cat, you're here for the subject of this video, which is not going to be necessarily a fun one, but I think it's necessary to talk about, which is euthanizing pets. And basically I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because I've been seeing some discourse on it. I always kind of see discourse on it because there's always going to be the people who are diehard against it and the people who are for it. If you've been here for any length of time, then you know that I will euthanize my pets when it gets to that point in their life. I will not let them suffer. And so if you are someone who really, really disagrees with that, you're probably not going to like this video. It's not going to be in your favor. So let's just kind of talk about it a little bit. Now, I don't in general have too much of an opinion on when other people choose to euthanize their pets, because if it's not a pet that I have access to, then I do not know how they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I try not to judge other people for when they choose to do it, because I don't know them, I don't know their pet, and it's just not my place. There are exceptions to this rule, and we will get into that, because sometimes it is so incredibly obvious that the animal is suffering and needs to be euthanized that it's actually painful to watch. For the most part, I just try to let people come to that conclusion on their own, because it can be a very personal thing, especially if you're someone who doesn't deal with grief very well, or the anticipation of the grief is very hard for you. Just know that it is, if you're getting to that point, you're doing a kindness to your pet. They cannot tell you, they cannot communicate with you whether or not they are done. So you just have to go based on what you feel is right for them. And it is, in my opinion, a necessary part of pet ownership, and it is something that you should be willing to do. Now, my very, very blunt opinion that's going to get some people upset is that if you are completely unwilling to euthanize your pet, you are being selfish. A lot of people like to make arguments, and that's what we're going to be talking about here, about why you should not ever put an animal to sleep. And one of the most popular ones is that, well, you want to do this to a human, and the biggest difference between an animal and a human is a human can tell you when they're done. A human can communicate with you in some way and say, I am done with this now. The other factor is humans have a lot more medical options than animals do in general, especially rats, because rats do not have the same ability with rats as they do with even cats or dogs, let alone a human. And what a rat can take is not what a human can take. So the lifespan of a rat is 2 to 3 years. If you have a 2-year-old rat that has cancer, it's not necessarily going to make sense to try and treat that cancer most of the time. A lot of the times you don't even have time to treat it. Sometimes you wake up and your rat has a tumor, and then 3 days later the tumor has quadrupled in size and is hindering their ability to move around. And your best option is to euthanize. So comparing rats to humans, or any animal honestly to humans, doesn't make sense, because there's never going to be as much research done on animals for their medical benefit as there's going to be for humans. And a lot of times what we learn about animals is to aid human beings, not for the animal themselves. Even a lot of time with human trials, it's not to aid all human beings, it's to aid a certain set of human beings. So yes, that is not a good argument. Another argument is that euthanasia is not natural. talking about what is natural with pets, in my opinion, is very hit and miss, because the fact of the matter is, what is natural for them is to not live in a human's home. It is not natural for them to lounge in a hammock waiting on you to bring them food and water. It is not natural for them to be on antibiotics, or to have surgery, or to have nebulizer treatments, or to have pain medication. It is not natural for them to be the colors that they are. These animals do not exist in nature as they are, because we have changed them. We have bred in genetic mutations that cause things like hairlessness, different coat types, different colors, so that we can enjoy them as pets. And like, they're fine. They're happy, they're healthy, they're fine as pets. So to compare them to their wild counterparts, especially in things with like medical issues, is baffling to me, because you've already completely changed their nature. Because it's also not natural for them to want to cuddle you, or to sleep in your shirt or your hand. It is not natural for them to be excited at the sight of a human. Yet you want all those things for your pets, and then you argue that it's not natural to euthanize them. But if you've ever done anything with a vet, that is also not natural for them. So you're just trying to make an argument so that you don't have to do something that makes you uncomfortable. And a lot of things with your pets are going to make you uncomfortable, and that's just something you have to accept as a pet owner. There are things that I don't like, and sometimes you have to deal with that, and you just have to keep going. Same with everything. Sometimes you're going to deal with something that's not going to feel good to you, but you have to do it anyway, because that's just how life is. Now, another argument I hear is that as long as they're eating and drinking, that's fine. They're fine. They can keep going. Now, that's honestly a bad argument for any animal. Like my cat, for example, I was just talking about how she's sick. She had 3 symptoms. One was a fever, which I didn't know until I took her to the vet. One was that she wasn't spending as much time with me. And the third was that she wasn't eating. She just stopped eating. And she's eating now. She just stopped eating. So she stopped eating on Saturday. I took her to the vet on Monday. She didn't start eating again until Tuesday. And based on the argument that if they stop eating, that's when you should put them to sleep, she'd be gone, but she's eating now. And the thing is, some animals are going to respond to this differently. So this is a rat channel. Let's talk about rats. Rats are going to eat. If they are physically capable of eating, they are going to eat. Inappetence is very rarely a symptom with rats. Very, very rarely. The only time I've really had rats refuse food is when they're full. Like when they're very, very past the point of full. Or if it's just a food they don't particularly like, but they'll still eat other things. The thing with rats is I've had rats on death's door, and I've been like, hey, do you want some banana oatmeal? And they were like, of course I want some banana oatmeal. Who do you think you're talking to? If they stop eating, they are past the point of where you probably should have considered euthanizing them. Most of the time. Sometimes, yes, you can get a rat that doesn't want to eat for a couple of days and then they start eating because they're sick. But again, they're usually going to eat. They're going to eat if they're capable of eating. And another thing with that particular argument is that pituitary tumors, a symptom is that they won't eat on their own necessarily. They won't seek out food. But if you put food or water in front of them, they will eat and drink, because they're just like, basically the way a vet described it to me once is they forget food's a thing. And then when it's put in front of them, they're just like, oh, this is food, I'll eat it. Because it's just a symptom of the pituitary tumor. Pituitary tumors cause a lot of neurological issues. Obviously, they're a brain tumor, and they just get weird with food. So again, the not eating thing doesn't really apply to rats, and not drinking water as well, because most rats, again, well, even if they're not eating, they'll still drink water. Rats like water. There's also the factor that there's so much more to their little lives than just being able to eat and drink. They have like companions, so can they properly cuddle with their companions? Can they safely move around the cage? Can they do the things that they like? It is so much more than can they eat and drink. It's kind of a shell of a life to decide that, well, they can eat and drink and that's good enough. That's all they need to do. They don't need to be happy. They don't need to not be in pain. They don't need to cuddle with their friends. They don't need to be able to climb or run on the wheel or forage for toys. They don't need anything but to be able to eat and drink. That is a very hollow, empty life. One that sounds very miserable. Now, if you are considering putting your rat to sleep and you just don't know if it's time, one thing I'll say is I've heard the advice, if you're thinking about it, then it's time. Ask someone with anxiety, and invasive thoughts. That's terrible advice. Awful. No. Basically, what I just said is a good way to kind of consider it. Is, are they eating and drinking, but also are they doing the things that they enjoy, and how much of what do they enjoy are they not doing? So let's say that they are eating and drinking and they are cuddling with their companions and they're interacting with them and they're foraging for toys, but they're not like running on their wheel. That's okay, because some things like HLD, that's going to prevent them from being as mobile as they used to be, but they can still be happy and have a full life, even if they can't enjoy all the things that they used to enjoy. Now, HLD is a condition where they slowly go paralyzed from their back end forward, and it is a progressive disease. It'll keep going and going and going. They will completely lose their ability to use their back legs. I personally like to put them to sleep when they are very inactive, or when it becomes dangerous for them to navigate their cage and I can't make it safer for them, or when it becomes clear that they can no longer at all lift their back legs, because usually they can still do a little shuffle, but I personally don't let them get to a point where they have to drag their body, because that is going to be while they can't feel their back legs, they can still feel their front end, and they can still feel their back, their spine. And I just personally don't want to ever put that kind of pressure on their spine and their arms. They're going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be in pain. So for me, I choose not to let it go that far. But just because they're less mobile in the beginning does not mean automatically that you have to euthanize them. There is a point where it becomes necessary. Now, to an extent, this is a video of me shouting into the void, much like my Pet Store Rats one before, because the people who are going to agree with me are going to agree with me, and the people who don't aren't. And nothing I really say is going to sway anyone that are in these two camps. There's very few people in the middle camp who just don't know how they feel about it. And I personally, for me, I cannot understand how people can just watch an animal suffer day in and day out and decide that that's fine. For me, I can't do that. Of just like, if they're not going to get better, if there's no treatment that's going to make them better, it's time to let them go. That's how we've always felt. Now, there's going to be some occasions where August is batting at the tripod now. There's going to be some occasions where you might be able to do something that might work, and for that, it just kind of depends on the situation. Like, for example, cabergoline and pituitary tumors. Cabergoline with pituitary tumors. Sometimes they work, most of the time it doesn't. And I feel like it's perfectly fine for people to give it a try if they want. I haven't personally done that yet, just because the instances where I could have tried cabergoline, it just didn't fit the situation. Like, August, come here. Come here. She's crazy. It just didn't fit the situation. Like with Fifey, I could have tried the cabergoline with her, but then she would have been alone. And she would have been alone until I knew the cabergoline was working, and then she would have been doing intros with potentially an only... Because sometimes it works really great, and sometimes it only kind of works. And if it was only kind of working, I wouldn't have wanted to do intros. And I just didn't want her to be alone for the rest of her life. So with Fifey, I opted not to do the cabergoline and just let her go with honey. It's things like that. Sometimes the situation, it makes more sense to forego the treatment and just allow them to rest, basically. I think it's important to acknowledge that and to say that, like, if that's something you're choosing to do, you shouldn't feel guilty. It's okay to opt for your animal's comfort when you know that they have something that is ultimately going to end their life. You don't ever let anyone make you feel guilty if you choose to do that, because you are, at the end of the day, you just have your animal's best interest at heart, and sometimes it's not an easy decision, and that is okay. Now, I do believe in palliative care. Just because an animal does have something that might... Can you stop? You goofy. The cats are on it today. I do believe in palliative care just because an animal is definitely has a condition that is definitely going to result in the end of their life does not mean that they can't still have a good quality of life until it gets to a certain point. So I do think that if you want to try cabergoline, that's fine. I think it's okay to try medications for heart failure. I think if they have respiratory issues, I've gone like to the ends of the earth for my pets with their respiratory issues with my rats, trying to make them as comfortable as possible. And that is also fine. I know a lot of people think that the second animal gets sick, that's it. And it doesn't have to be. You can absolutely extend their life and keep them happy for quite a while after they've been diagnosed with something that is in all likelihood going to be what causes them to pass away. And again, even though I am shouting into the void, I did want to talk a little bit about my feelings on the pets I have euthanized. So if you are in that small camp of people who isn't sure where you fall and you're trying to figure out how you feel about the whole thing, what I will say is that I have one animal that I regret euthanizing when I did, but I have way more that I regret not euthanizing sooner. So the one I regret is my rat Clover, and to be perfectly fair, it was not a wrong decision necessarily. So Clover, she was 2 years and 4 months old. She was depressed after she lost her sister, and she had been depressed for 4 months at that point. She was not interacting with the other rats. She didn't fight them or anything. She was okay with them, but she wasn't seeking them out. She was not spending time with them. And now it's Betty rubbing up on the tripod, guys. She was not spending time with them. She was not seeking them out. They weren't really interacting with her because they like to sleep at the top and she slept at the bottom. She had a couple of other health issues. And the main thing was that she had some respiratory issues. They were not severe issues, but at the time I did not have a lot of experience with respiratory issues in rats. So I thought they were bad because I couldn't make them go away, basically. And now I understand that she was probably not that bad. Respiratory wise, like she was probably, hey, they don't get to see you often. She's purring. Your sister's up there. But we had tried multiple medications and they hadn't worked, and so the vet recommended that I euthanize her, and I did, because that's what the vet recommended, and I wasn't having any luck with her respiratory issues. And now, as a way more seasoned rat owner, she had more time in her where she would have been fairly comfortable. But again, it wasn't the worst decision because she was not healthy in other ways as well, and she just was not interacting with the other rats because she was too depressed to care. So I regret not trying for a little bit longer to see if I could get her to interact with them. But it had been, at that point, I think 4 months with 2 of them and 2 months with the other 2, and she just didn't care about them at all. Now, the ones I regret not euthanizing are a lot harder for me than Clover because I just feel like I failed them in a very, very different way. So one of them was Hopper. She had respiratory issues, severe respiratory issues, and I could tell that she was dying, and I decided that, and it was late at night, and I decided that in the morning I was going to call the vet and I was going to put her to sleep, and she ended up passing away in the cage that night. And I regret not just taking her to emergency vet and letting her go, because I know that she was not well. I know that she suffered in her last hours, and it bothers me a lot to think about how uncomfortable and miserable she was when I should have just figured it out and taken her to a vet. Another one is Ezra, my boy. With him, it was a more complicated situation. He had some kind of infection, either a tooth root abscess or a bone infection in his cheek. And we had been trying for, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks to get it under control. And the first medication we tried, which was, I'm going to just pop the name up because this is one I can't pronounce, I'll stutter over it. And it worked really well. I could tell that it was getting the infection, and the swelling was gone. He was perkier. I could tell it was working, but they didn't give me enough of it. And by the time I got more of it, the infection had come back and it had become resistant to that antibiotic. And so we decided to try a second antibiotic. And when we decided to try the second antibiotic, he was in not great shape. He was way worse than when we had tried the first one. but I was being stubborn about it, basically, because the first antibiotic had been so close to working, and I just wanted to try. I wanted to try because we had been so close, so close to fixing him. And basically, what happened is I went downstairs to get my lunch. I came back upstairs with my food, and I saw him lying in the corner of the cage, and something about it was off, so I set my food down and I went to check on him, and he was bleeding from his mouth and his nose profusely. And so I pulled him out, and I dropped everything, and I took him to the vet, and I put him to sleep immediately. And by the time that was done, I was covered in blood. My shirt was covered in blood. His cage was covered in blood. He had been bleeding for like an hour and a half, is my best guess, because I had fed them like 30-40 minutes before, and sometime between then and when I found him is when the bleeding started, and it took a while for the vet to basically get to us, and he was resistant to the medication that puts him to sleep. So like he was bleeding for a while, and my issue with that is I knew in my gut, I knew it wasn't gonna work, but I wanted to try so badly that I tried, and that meant that his last week was just him suffering, and God knows how much pain. And like his eye, he couldn't see out of one of his eyes because it had ulcerated because the pressure had made it bulge, and he had scratched it on something, and that's one of the hardest ones for me, to be honest. And the reason I'm telling you these stories is because yes, it is a complicated issue. Yes, sometimes you're going to make the wrong decision, but as long as you always have your pet's best interest at heart, then you are doing the right thing for them when it comes to euthanasia. So I do believe in euthanasia, obviously. I don't like the arguments people make against it, because a lot of time it just comes across as them not wanting to deal with it, basically. There are some people and some rescues even that are going to use manipulative language and try to make you feel guilty, like you just don't love your pet enough, like you just view them as a burden. There is nothing I would not do for my pets. I've mentioned it many times, I am a helicopter mom. I'm a helicopter mom with all of my pets, the cats included. I would do anything for them as long as I knew they were going to be happy and okay. If I know they're not going to be happy and okay, then I will also let them go, because that is the best thing I can personally do for them. So yeah, I hope this video wasn't too much of a bummer for you. It probably was. And I hope that for anyone who's like that small camp of people who don't know where they fall yet, if you're watching this, I hope that it helps in some way. It is a very personal thing, a very personal decision to make, and it's not always so clear cut, so just try to follow your heart, try to do the right thing for your pets. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!